I'm Al Filreis, and this is PoemTalk at the Writer's House, where I have the pleasure of convening three friends to collaborate on a close but not too close reading of a poem or two. We'll talk, maybe even disagree a bit, and perhaps open up the verse to a few new possibilities, and we hope gain for some poems that interest us some new readers and listeners. And I say listeners because PoemTalk poems are available in recordings made by the poets themselves as part of our Pen Sound archive, writing.upenn.edu/pensound. Well, PoemTalk has gone on the road again, and we are here in Los Angeles, California at the Pacific Palisades home of Marjorie Perloff, who for the third time, I think it's the third time in PoemTalk history, has generously agreed to host us, along with audio maestro Chris Martin and videographer, editor, director Zach Gardner, who are recording this episode for both audio and video playback. I'm also joined by Robert von Hallberg, professor of literature, Claremont McKenna College, fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and author of many books, among them Lyric Powers, The Maltese Falcon, To Body of Lies, Spies, Noirs, and Trust, American Poetry and Culture, 1945. 1980, last time we did this, Bob, I said it was a very important book for me, and it remains so. And Charles Olson, The Scholar's Art, among other work, and by Charles Altieri, professor emeritus at Berkeley, also a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and he too, author of too many books to name, including Wallace Stevens and the Demands of Modernity, The Art of Modern American Poetry, The Particulars of Rapture and Aesthetics of the Affects, Canons and Consequences, and one new one, which I have a feeling is going to be part of our Gathering Paradise at the end, so we'll hold off for that. And by our aforementioned kind host, the amazing, super productive Marjorie Perloff, Austrian-born poetry scholar and critic, whose books include, just to name a few of them, Edge of Irony, Modernism in the Shadow of the Habsburg Empire, Unoriginal Genius, The Vienna Paradox, a memoir which has now been translated into 5 languages, I want to say, possibly, maybe 6, Wittgenstein's Ladder, a book that is back in everybody's minds, The Futurist Moment, and relevant to today's PoemTalk, her 1977 book on Frank O'Hara titled Poet Among Painters, and who, just to add some fun facts, okay, we've never done this in an intro, but we're about to, took her graduate degrees from, you don't tell us, anyone guess? Graduate degrees from?
Catholic University.
Catholic University, bing, yeah. You get a point. Whose second teaching job was at?
The first was Maryland, or the second.
I think Maryland counts as the second, because yeah, okay. Maryland is the answer, so you get a half point for that. Who left Vienna in when, what month and year? Oh, you can, the Anschluss. March of 1938. Whose very first book in 1970 was about?
Yeats.
Oh. Yeah. You win. And we've never done this before. Oh, there's one more. And whose most recent book publication is a new translation of The Private Notebooks of Ludwig Wittgenstein, 1914, 1916. How was that? We've never done a bio quiz. Marjorie, thank you. Hello. Thank you for hosting us again.
Hello to you, Al.
Great
to see you.
We've had some fun conversations in this spot. Bob, good to see you as always.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you. And Charlie, you're a rookie on PoemTalk. I can't believe it.
No, well, yes, we did a little small thing at the
at the Huntington right before COVID. I said, we pulled out our phone and we did the same of a Stevens. We both talked Stevens. I think we did Anecdote of the Jar.
Yeah, you did it, yeah.
Or out
at the Huntington, I think so.
I'm not sure. Did we do the Snowman?
No. We did Anecdote of the Jar. We did Plot Against the Giant.
That's right. Okay.
Such fun. Anyway, welcome, Charlie. Well, today the four of us have gathered here to talk about 2 poems by Frank O'Hara. The first is titled Poem, or Poem, Lana Turner Has Collapsed, very famous, and Song, Is It Dirty, sometimes known as Song. They are both obviously printed in the collected poems of Frank O'Hara. The recording of poem we'll hear is from a reading O'Hara gave at the Lockwood Memorial Library at SUNY Buffalo in September of 1964. And the audio of song we'll hear is taken from the TV program USA Today Poetry, USA:Poetry, from the 11th episode of that series produced by Richard Moore for KQED TV and WNET in New York, and was extracted from the video originally filmed in New York at O'Hara's apartment in March of 1966. So here now is Frank O'Hara performing Poem, Lana Turner Has Collapsed, and Song, Is It Dirty?
The next poem is called Poem 2. Lana Turner has collapsed. I was trotting along and suddenly it started raining and snowing, and you said it was hailing, but hailing hits you on the head hard, so it was really snowing and raining. And I was in such a hurry to meet you, but the traffic was acting exactly like the sky, and suddenly I see a headline, Lana Turner has collapsed. There is no snow in Hollywood. There is no rain in California. I have been to lots of parties and acted perfectly disgraceful, but I never actually collapsed. Oh, Lana Turner, we love you. Get up.
The next poem is called Song. Is it dirty? Does it look dirty? That's what you think of in the city. Does it just seem dirty? That's what you think of in the city. You don't refuse to breathe, do you? Someone comes along with a very bad character. He seems attractive. Is he really? Yes, very. He's attractive as his character is bad. Is it? Yes. That's what you think of in the city. Run your finger along your no-moss mind. That's not a thought, that's soot. And you take a lot of dirt off someone. Is the character less bad? No. It improves constantly. You don't refuse to breathe, do you?
Let's turn to the Lana Turner poem. Bob, start with you, and everybody can follow. I'm interested in the use of the verb tenses. I naively, every time I go back to O'Hara, I think, oh, he uses the present tense, I do this, I do that, it's amazing. But then when I reread this, I realized it's a very complicated use of tense. It's not so simple. Can you get us started?
Well, it's in the present at the beginning, has collapsed. We're in the moment where that's a report on the past, but we're in that moment. Although he doesn't read it dramatically, that first line at all. Yeah, but then it goes into the past with I was trotting along and so forth. It breaks out at, and suddenly I see a headline, Lana Turner has collapsed. And there into the present. I mean, what I like about the poem, aside from its being amusing, is that it's encouraging. It's a little moral parable of, come on, get up, and let's get a move on. So, with the past, then shifting into the present and extracting the lesson of the past into the present at the end of the poem.
So Marjorie, it seems to, what Bob is suggesting is it seems to work with the I do this, I do that, with the setup of there's a little playfulness about the past. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I think it's very accurate too. I think one of the important things about O'Hara, we were talking about this at a discussion about, of all things, Robert Lowell and Frank O'Hara, because he wrote it on the Staten Island ferry. You know, at least he said so.
On his way to a reading.
On his way to a reading at Staten
Wagner
Island.
College.
And he wrote it, and Robert Lowell got very angry and said, well, I don't read poems that I've written on the ferry, you know, I don't do that. So it was sort of suspect in a way. And obviously he was sort of also poking fun, I think, at Whitman's Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, Hartcrans the Bridge, all those things about bridges and ferries. But the word collapsed is very interesting because you can collapse from all kinds of things. I mean, you can collapse from illness, you can collapse from other things, but the accuracy is that Lana Turner was no longer in 62 what she had been because she had had all that trouble with Johnny Stompanato, her husband, and the daughter, Cheryl, whatever her name was, Crane, had knifed him. You remember that? The daughter they had had a huge fight, and the daughter got so upset that she knifed him.
Or took responsibility for Turner knifing him.
Right. And so Lana Turner was in the news a lot, but for all kinds of things and not such good things. And so Lana Turner has collapsed. I mean, it's such a famous name, and yet collapsed. So, I mean, the choice is, it's not just any movie star, I want to begin by saying. Yeah.
Charlie, take us anywhere you want to go.
Well, what interests me most about the poem is just what is the worldview in which this speaking occurs, and what's the attitude towards Lana Turner? And I think that he sets it up as a contest, right? Who can collapse and who can't collapse, who can push the limit further. And because she can push the limit further, he wants her, they love her, get up. And I think it's partially my own account of gayness in that New York environment. It becomes a kind of freedom from Enlightenment moralism, senses of rightness. And it allows a kind of cultivation of intensities and presence, so that the poem is, in a way, a kind of celebration of morality.
Acting disgracefully.
Right.
To a point is your point.
Well, as a contest, right, how much can you risk, or how much can you reject moral standards for love, for other kinds of relationships? And when I was preparing, it's as if Nietzsche gets invented in a kind of minor social tone, but the rejection of mainstream moral thinking seems to me virtually absolute in this poem, right?
I have been watching the expressions of our two friends, and I cannot wait to hear first Bob, then Marjorie. What are you thinking?
I think I'm following up on what Charlie said about the suspension of moral judgment, but go back to Marjorie on the word collapse and focus on that, because I think it's obviously a complicated word, but when he says, Lana Turner has collapsed, and then it's as though somebody said, what's she got to worry about? What's Lana Turner got to? What justification for collapsing does she have? That line's excised. There is no snow in Hollywood, and now we get the artful recovery of the relevance of what seemed irrelevant before. Was it hail or was it rain? And that's recovered here. Like, the environment is perfect in California. What has she got? What reason does she have to collapse?
And she has some reasons. We were just discussing them.
Yes,
right?
that's right. And I've gone to parties and behaved perfectly disgracefully, but I never did that. I never collapsed. And then the solution, I mean, it's very funny. I think I don't need to say, everybody sees the humor there.
Even the audience in Buffalo at the Lockwood Memorial Library laughed.
You go.
They need to laugh.
But the solution is,
because it snows there.
Is the affirmation of love.
Say that again.
The solution to Lana being collapsed is, we love you. Come on, get up.
That's a crucial part of it.
Yes. We
it forms a community.
Whatever
virtually.
your problems are, they should be resolved by feeling loved. And we love you. Come on, get up.
Marjorie, what are you thinking?
Well, I think it's just a very ordinary situation. I think one reason people love Frank O'Hara all around the world is we've all had this experience. I don't see so much the higher morality in it, namely, I'm feeling rotten. I've got a hangover. Last night I behaved perfectly disgraceful, been to lots of parties. But so I'm feeling pretty awful, and it's raining and hailing, and I'm late, and New York is horrible, and there's noise. And you see this headline, Lana Turner has collapsed, which is such a ridiculous headline. Is there no other better news that you see on the newsstands as you walk by? But who the hell cares? Lana Turner. Oh, well, Lana Turner has collapsed. There's no rain in Hollywood. I mean, she didn't even have a reason to collapse like me. Who knows why he collapsed, whatever. But I've never actually collapsed.
And
Lana Turner, we love you, get up. And I don't think it's so much about love. I think it's the joke, the kind of campy joke about, thank you for having collapsed because you give me permission. I feel better about last night.
So it's
that's how I read it.
You focused on the word trotting. I'm trotting. And you're just lying there.
I've been to lots of parties and acted perfectly disgraceful, and it's hailing and raining, but you say it's not hail. So
why do you say it that having done all those things doesn't mean he did it last night, right? I mean, there's nothing in the
He
poem
says
to
so.
suggest
I've
that.
been to lots of parties and acted perfectly disgraceful. You would presume it's the night before.
No, why do you
but I
presume
never
that?
actually.
I don't,
in the
I don't
past.
presume
Well,
that
all right,
at all.
but all right. But let's say you don't.
But then
Suppose you don't.
that contextualizes the love. I mean, because you can love Lana Turner as a kind of aid or support, or you can love Lana Turner because she breaks the rules.
Or you cannot love her. I would say he doesn't. I don't think he's saying he loves her. I'm saying, oh, thanks for saying that, Charlie. I love you. I've always felt that way. You know.
Oh,
I mean, it's that kind of love you.
I
you
think
know.
that trivializes the poem.
I want to. Before we turn to the other poem, I want to throw something out. It's probably a little goofy, but that's my job. He famously wrote it on the Staten Island ferry. He's on his way to Wagner College. I even know who the host of the reading was. It was Willard Moss, who was Marie Mencken's partner and a bisexual filmmaker and very much in the scene. And he was on his way quickly to this reading. There's been several accounts of it. I love the phrase "get up" because it suggests a certain productivity. Lana Turner's a has-been. She's not getting up. O'Hara's got to write another poem for the reading tonight. I mean, you almost get a sense that he's run out of, and he does it right there. That is the best getting up I've ever heard. Getting up is like, I'm going to write the poem right now and screw Lowell, who thinks I had to have spent 6 months in drafts that are all now at the Harvard Library, the Lowell thing. Really a different mode entirely. I'm going to write it, and I'm getting up. It's not survival. It's standing up. It is productivity. It is, I can do this. This is what I do.
Exactly.
Come on, Lana,
Yeah,
you can do
that's
it
what I
too.
think, too.
How does that sound?
I agree.
And I agree too. And in the context of poetry, I mean, you think of Lowell's Lord Weary's Castle, you know, how dark that was and how awful. I mean, years before, granted, you know,
Yeah,
15
years,
before.
long time
Yeah,
before.
15 years. So, but this is very affirmative, and that's the beauty
Yes.
of Frank O'Hara, you know, is that
Yeah.
he has that bright spirit
Yeah. Well,
that comes
it's sad.
through.
Very
But
sad.
it's not any bright spirit, right? I mean, and I didn't know about the Lowell context, but it's perfect for that kind of concrete alternative of that I can identify with you because you are now feeling worse than I felt, but because of excess, and therefore I want to affirm you. We want to affirm you.
Well, excess has resistance.
Yes,
It's a major theme for him. Speaking of acting disgraceful, I love that non-adverb there.
Yeah.
Acting disgraceful. I wish I
We
could
should
talk
talk
that
about
way.
that.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that before we go to the next poem?
Yeah, I think I do.
It
I mean,
signifies.
because it's hard. I listened to you, and you hesitated a little.
Marjorie
in
almost
speaking
couldn't
it.
say it.
Almost couldn't
right?
say. it.
Couldn't say it
Disgraceful?
wrong. You could almost
You
not.
wanted the adverb.
You had to
Disgraceful.
add the adverb because that's.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us about the artifice of his style? That is, who is it? Does he not know that he needs an adverb there?
Clearly
no.
he knows.
No. So, but why? Then he's pretending to be somebody who is occupying a zone of the English language that doesn't discriminate
And who-
between adjectives and adverbs.
And who's also moving very fast and is not going to revise,
Yeah.
supposedly.
Okay.
You know,
Yes.
I like that.
Good point.
Well, speaking of acting perfectly disgraceful, we have another poem where, you know, there's a seedy side of a city. I guess my opening question is for Charlie. It, in the first line, is it dirty? At that point, we don't know what it is. We're going to learn what it is, I think. But at that point, is it dirty? I mean, because the poem is called Song, my first reaction when I first read this poem was, oh, it's a dirty song. It's dirty.
Yeah.
That may be in later, but clearly something else is dirty. Nominations are open for what is dirty.
A shirt.
A shirt?
He's getting dressed, thinking about yeah.
Marjorie doesn't agree.
I just think it's the question: is it dirty? Is the subway dirty? Is the city dirty?
It meaning
Cities
like the
are
weather.
dirty. It's not supposed to be one
It's dirty
thing.
outside. Yeah.
What? It's dirty. Is it dirty? But of course, also, is it dirty? You know, is the song dirty or whatever?
Charlie, by doing my PoemTalk thing and saying it is open-ended, you know, is it open-ended? It is, isn't it, a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's open-ended in the sense that it doesn't have a referent, but the open-endedness produces part of the tightness of the poem, because by the end, right, both it and dirty have changed. I mean, it becomes this possibility of this encounter, and dirty becomes a blessing, right? At least as I see it. And
Dirty becomes a blessing.
yeah, I mean, it produces the promise of a sexual encounter that cleanliness.
Where is
would-
there the promise of a sexual encounter?
With the guy,
Well, someone comes along.
the guy who's
Well,
handsome.
he has a crush on somebody,
Yeah.
and he's told he's very bad, but he has a crush on anyway. That doesn't mean they're having an encounter.
All right.
Well, that's
No, but
something
that's
of an
what's-
encounter.
the
But that's
fantasy
what's
of the
at
counter,
stake.
at least.
A fantasy encounter. That's
Should
what you think of in the
should
city.
you go to bed with this guy?
At the very least.
Yeah, but it's not clear that that's even available.
No, but it's desirable.
Yeah.
It's
Desirable.
okay that it's desirable.
Oh, yeah, but that's different from having an encounter.
Okay. But anyway, the referent moves and the dirty moves. Those are my
Can we
points.
riff on what dirty means in a lot of different senses? I mean, there are two, obviously, that we're already talking about, but let's spell it out for folks who want to hear us spell it
Well,
out.
I think it's a shirt in the beginning, because I think
He's
he's
getting
getting
ready.
ready,
I don't think that at all.
he thinks he asks, "Is it, what you do? You check out the shirt. Can you wear this shirt again? Is it dirty? Does it look dirty?" And then he says, "That's what you think of in the city, appearances."
I think you're specifying it much more. Is it dirty? Does it look dirty? That's what you think of in the city. That is what you think of in the city. Why would it be a shirt?
So you
Well,
don't.
I mean, it could be a jacket. That
No,
doesn't
why
matter.
is it an it at all?
Because
it's
it's-
Well,
dirty.
because he's going
Is it
out
dirty?
into the city.
Is the house dirty? Is the garden dirty? Is it dirty?
But now I see something that I hadn't before. I should have maybe. You don't refuse to breathe, do you? Means even if it's dirty.
Exactly.
Right? I didn't see that, but it's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
But we have a lot of complex things about the city going on. First of all, breathing the dirty air, right?
And this
Breathing
was
as
at
an
a time-
analogy
yeah.
to being dirty, right? This is a dirty, grimy time. So I'm still you guys are all too sophisticated for me. I just want to riff on what dirty could mean.
Well, in sense that
Dirty
no
meaning-
moss
It's
mine.
It's a city adjective. It's the New York adjective.
Right.
The thing that was always said about New York, especially in those years. It's so
dirty.
dirty.
I
We're
can't
moving to
live there. It's
Westchester.
too dirty.
New York is too dirty.
Right.
I don't want to go to New York.
But for-
so it begins with a normal question, a silly question: is it dirty? But it quickly becomes obviously something else, which is: it is the thought dirty? Is the
is the
thinking
thought
dirty?
dirty? Acting disgraceful.
But where I don't
Yes,
understand.
dirty thoughts. I think that's a phrase I heard when I was a kid. You can't have don't have dirty thoughts.
Dirty
Or
thoughts. yes,
joke?
Yes. Yes.
Is it a dirty joke?
A dirty
Is it
joke.
Dirty
Yeah.
joke.
Yeah.
So that would be when your finger along your no moss mine. That's not a thought. That's soot. I mean, that's.
Yeah. No moss mine. What a phrase for this poem.
Yeah.
What the heck
It's
is
quite
that doing
striking.
there? Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Not
think
countryside
you
in a
don't-
way. It's
you
the best
don't-
I can do.
You don't. Your mind doesn't stand still. No moss grows.
No
Oh, that's
moss
better.
growing
That's
on.
right.
I
That's
think
right.
when I think
No
of that
moss
phrase,
grows.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I think of that phrase that I must have been a kid when I heard somebody say it for the first time. I say it all the time. No moss growing on that Rolling Stone, meaning Frank is so kinetic and so active. There's no moss growing on him.
But the run
That
your
mean-
finger also suggests masturbation.
and dirtiness.
No
the
moss
white glove
mine.
treatment.
You can
know.
do a lot with it, but it's sexual. I think that's a sexual.
Well, there's a lot
That's
of
not a thought. That's soot. That's so funny.
Can you clean someone up, and are they still? You clean up nice.
That's a
There's
serious
another one of those
question.
adverbs. You clean up nice, but
Not
you're
this
still a
person,
dirty
yeah.
character.
Yes, but then he says he qualifies that by saying, is the character less bad? No, it improves constantly.
Yeah, what does that mean?
I think
that's
it means
funny.
that that cleansing this person in any one stroke, not possible. He's still going to be that person. However, the character improves in time, because that is what, I take it the question is whether you go to bed with this guy and fulfill your desire. You feel the desire. This guy's
Despite character flaw.
yeah, and
Not just character flaw.
is he going to improve by it? No, not going to be able to remove that. But in time, it improves. Yeah.
Let's talk about New York. It's a very important topic,
agree.
Especially in the second poem, but probably in both. Who wants to start? Bob?
Well, I think this is a kind of Baudelairean poem in the one we're talking about the dirtiness of the city, the sootiness of the city, and the lowness of one's desire. There's a poem, Le Jeu, of the game, and in a bordello, and he's describing these very ancient prostitutes and gamblers and pimps and so forth, and admiring that they have been persistent in their desire. And I think what he is doing here is questioning. It's hard, I may be wrong because it makes him seem prim, but I think he's questioning the nature of his desire for this character, and it's a desire of slumming, sort of. That it's inside him.
Fascinating. Marjorie, do you want to pick up New York and then
Well,
Charlie?
I think the tone is very different from that. I just don't see that. I mean, I love Baudelaire, but I don't think that's the tone. I think it's very light, and I think it's something that I would say that is iterative. It happens all the time. You know, I'm talking to Vincent, and I say, oh, and he'll say, oh, you don't want to get involved with him. You know, he's got a very bad character. And the very fact that he has a bad character makes him more appealing. Oh, really? He comes along. Is his character bad? Is it? Yes. That's what you think of in the city. Run your finger along your no moss mind. That's not a thought. It's soot, which is such an amazing line, as if you're having a thought about something dirty, so the thought is soot. It literally is.
Yes.
Becomes soot. And you take a lot of dirt off someone. Is the character less bad?
Yeah.
No, it improves constantly. You don't refuse to breathe, do you? It's sort of the willingness to say, I'm not prudish. I'm not going to be impressed by this. He appeals to me, whoever it is.
Charlie?
I can handle it.
I agree with Marjorie's reading, but not the tone of her reading. I think this is too general, but if you imagine that song is connected to pastoral in a way, this is the kind of perfect urban anti-pastoral. And the celebration of the reversals all the way through become a condition of not just living in the city, that's what Lowell would think, but embracing the city, because it's not the country, it's not moss.
It's no moss.
Yeah.
No moss.
But it's also Dear Dirty Dublin, I think of that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
good.
that kind of dirty,
It's all
Dear
over.
Dirty Dublin,
Yeah, could there be
Likes
a
the
better
dirty.
way of describing O'Hara's approach than what you just described? I think I'm with Marjorie on tone, but I still want, and maybe it's just the poetry critic or poetry teacher in me that wants to make things like big, but the breathing to me becomes, I don't want to say serious, because it is, oh, you don't refuse to breathe, do you? Ha ha, that's smart. But there's something about breathing, its relation to poetry itself, inspiration.
Well, how about living? You don't refuse to live, do you?
No, but it is breathing. It is breathing specifically because, of course, it's got that
Internalizing,
fabulous...
taking it into your body.
Yeah, it's aspiration and inspiration. But, I want to take the poem seriously as a poem about poetry, and the only way I can do that... Yeah,
Why
you
do
don't
you
want
want to take it
Because
seriously?
that's my job.
But why
take it
can't it be
seriously.
about the city and about
I think
desire?
it is about
Why
the
does
city.
it
I think
have to
it's
be
about the city in
poetry?
relation
Why is that
to
your
poetry.
job? I mean,
I'm
the
being funny.
whole purpose is to see how you can maintain
I like-
that light
I
tone,
like
and
the-
you couldn't maintain if you override it. The typical poet would overwrite this poem this way: I met so and so, and seemed very.
I
and
love
then I
this
was warned
part.
about him. And then there'd be a lot of detail about who he was, what had
Yeah.
he done, who else had he had an affair with,
Right.
and all that. And you don't have any of that. You don't know. That's the whole purpose. You don't really know who it is.
I think this is, for me, an existential question about me. That is to say, when I find a metapoetic moment, and I do believe the breathing, it can be that, or is that, or I want it to be that, one of those three. I want to take it seriously. I know you don't refuse to breathe, do you? Ha ha, that's really clever. But you don't refuse to breathe any more than you refuse to be in the city, any more than you refuse to act out your desires when you can. And I think that poetry is associated with those desires and with needing to be in this particular place, this dirty city.
I think that.
I think it's a pretty serious
Do you
topic
know
for
that
him.
he's ever going to act out his desire? You don't know
I think
that.
he's happier
yeah.
with the song.
How do you know?
No, I don't know. I'm saying he's happier having written the song. I think it's the same thing with Lana Turner. I think he's really delighted that he put together a poem that quickly that is every bit as sophisticated and complicated in its rhetoric that we have discussed. How marvelous that he was able to do that. All of that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is I don't know if we said the word worked, but this is as worked as For the Union Dead, which took the guy 8 months to write. It's remarkable.
Yeah, no, but I think
We all agree on
that
that.
the middle stanza is the metapoetic, more forcefully metapoetic than the
Can you say
breathing.
why? How?
Because it turns
mean
what
someone comes
is
along?
a description into a kind of validation of a mode of desire. So it just changes the affective conditions of what the oppositions are, like dirt and non-dirt, because it puts a human context on it. And the placement of that seems to me just absolutely brilliant.
I would like to go twice around. Once around to invite each of us to say something about both poems, if you can, either comparatively similar or somewhat different. And then the second time around for final thoughts, any kind of thought you have that you haven't said yet. Bob, are you ready to do either of those?
Yeah, I think so. I love the Lana Turner poem, have always loved it, and I love the lightness of it. And I love Cavafy. And I think O'Hara, and I think of O'Hara and Cavafy as being a good kind of pairing for making clear both of them. I don't love this is a dirty poem.
You don't?
I don't, because it's so moralizing, and I don't understand the position from which you'd begin, and maybe this is just my limitation. I don't understand how you'd say, I'm really attracted to X, but he has a bad character. Should I or shouldn't I? I think that such a person, how can such a person have the lightness of spirit and the sophistication to write the Lana Turner poem, is the way I'm putting it.
Interesting comparison. Yeah. All right, Marjorie, a thought about both poems together or about O'Hara in general?
Yeah, maybe. See, where I disagree here, and I do like this poem so much, is I don't think it is about the real thing. I think it's what we tell ourselves. Like you tell me, you might want to meet so-and-so, and then I say, oh, what's he like? And you say, well, has a bad character. I mean, it's about that basic, I think all these poems are about basic moods, mental processes, whereby we justify ourselves or we try to explain why we did something. That doesn't mean it's a good thing to do, and it doesn't mean that's how you meet people and so on. But when you're confronted with this kind of situation where maybe it's somebody you really shouldn't meet, you justify it by saying, you don't refuse to breathe, do you? I mean, it's a way of justifying oneself. And so is the Lana Turner poem in a different way, a way of justifying yourself. And they're meant to be, I think they're generalized enough so that there isn't too much specificity, so that anybody could have this feeling. And I just think that's very appealing and very hard to do. And it's very funny, as I say, that's not a thought, that's soot. Of course, it is a thought. He's thinking it, but it's a dirty thought, so it's soot.
That's charming. That
It's
moment
charming.
in the poem is charming. But what do you think about the word character? That is to say,
Which, he himself?
No,
he uses he's
the word
assessing a
character.
sexual partner in terms of a prospective sexual partner in terms of character.
I don't think it's that literal. I mean, he's saying, you want to meet so-and-so? Well, he's really got a bad character. I mean...
Well, no one's ever said that to me, I don't think.
What?
I hope not.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I wish I would say
it's an
that.
I've had
old-fashioned-
that said to me
it's an
many
old-fashioned
times.
word.
Are you
that's
kidding?
my point.
I've
word
had
we
that
use.
said to me often. Well, they're kind of, he's really not a good person, and makes you more attractive, really, in many ways.
Charlie, your turn to talk about the poems in comparison.
Well,
if you
I mean,
can.
I think that, as people were saying, that the lightness is crucial, but the lightness has a finality to it. You can't imagine another word to an O'Hara poem. I mean, and that's really part of the striking effect. And of course, he doesn't do it with images. He does it with sheer intelligence almost, that sense of finality, which is really remarkable. And Lana Turner is a great example of that. The other poem is not, but I increasingly like it because it makes all the figures operate. Right? I mean, the dirt, the ordinariness in the beginning, the sense of that middle stanza and how the person is introduced and how one context of dirt just shifts entirely to a different kind of context of dirt and evaluation. And again, I mean, there's nothing else to be said. You breathe, don't you? I mean, Olson could say that in a way, right? But Olson would want to mystify the breathing process, whereas O'Hara's point is it's totally natural, and I think that's part of the power of the poem.
Marjorie, you're the host, so you get to break ranks and say
I
one thing.
One other thing. I think it's much more literary. So is Lana Turner than we're acknowledging, and that's one of the reasons O'Hara is so different from many of his imitators. Many of the New York imitators. Now, literary, for instance, this is the theme of, let's say, Lotte Lenya Surabaya, Johnny. Look how bad he is. He's a bad guy. And the more he's bad, the more, und ich liebe dich so, And so there are many, it's a common theme, and he certainly knew a lot of he certainly knew the Threepenny Opera, because he has a poem on it. And it's a basic Threepenny Opera theme, especially because he's a bad guy, has a bad reputation. That's why I'm drawn to him. Otherwise, it might be very dull. And so in both poems, I think in Lana Turner too, we could look and find, we haven't, but there are lots of literary references to earlier poems. I mean, he's very literary, Frank O'Hara, much more than he admits. And so there are a lot of literary cross-references, and that might make you feel a little bit differently about the word character.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a larger theme, it's about being attracted to something you know isn't good for you. It could be anything.
And I keep wanting to ask, does poetry have anything to do with that? Poetry itself.
What do you mean?
Well, this stance of, gosh, I like to do things that are probably not good for me, or I like to get involved with people who are probably not good for me. No. Does poetry, does his writing...
Once you state that, you lose the poetry.
Yeah, I wasn't the one who said it.
I don't know what you mean.
Marjorie is referring to an important tradition that enables the stories, the scene, and then that enables the tone and so forth. It's partly a...
How about Clarissa, Lovelace?
Well, exactly.
I know he's not good for me.
Yeah, but
exactly. So this is a time-honored tradition, and it may be quasi-pose for O'Hara at certain points, but what does that have to do with the production of the poems? I think everything. I think that's the get up point I was making. I think what comes out of this thought about Lana Turner, what comes out of this song, out of this experience, is that he got a really good poem in that tradition, and he did it perfectly, using the speaker who's not quite O'Hara, because O'Hara, I hope he took, was a little more careful in this. Let's go around one more time. This is a final thought on our discussion. It can be anything. A final thought. This is not our recommendations. That's next. Quick thought. Something you came today to want to say, but you didn't have a chance to.
Well, from the discussion, I'm struck by, I'm thinking differently about O'Hara.
Oh, really?
From
Great.
having the discussion, because I think all the artfulness and the intricacy that's come out in the conversation, I haven't been thinking of O'Hara that way. I think I do, and what Charlie was talking about the closure of the poems, that's kind of controversial for me, because I think he's got a lot of his art invested in clever remarks.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that I've got as much desire and admiration to give to clever remarks.
Who talked about clever remarks?
Huh?
Who
Bob
talked
just
about
did.
clever remarks?
I thought you did.
But we show how every
I don't
line
think
fits.
I
I
did.
thought you said
No.
that Is It Dirty closes with a clever remark.
No, you didn't.
No?
Well, if I did, I didn't mean a clever.
No, you didn't say
in
that.
the register of clever.
Okay,
But
well, I'll
Bob's
say it.
responding
I do
to it.
mean,
Yeah,
I'll
Bob's
stand
responding to
by
a
that. I
general-
thought I was just agreeing with you, but I actually think that's what it is.
Thank you, Bob.
Well,
Marjorie, final thought?
When I first wrote my horror book in the 70s, where people said, well, he's not really a major poet. And the funny thing is, he is, if you just look up, sales, that wouldn't necessarily mean anything, but he's one of the most popular poets in the world, in Poland, you name the country. And I'm trying to think why that's really so. And I think what you could just call clever remarks is an incredible way of creating tone. Now, he doesn't always achieve it. There are plenty of poems in the collected poems that drag or that don't quite work or whatever. But I think in both these and in many of his poems, what he's able to do that almost no other poet I can think of can do that way is a balanced tone so that the tonal register is so well done, the address and the sense and the way you feel you're overhearing and coming in the middle of it, and that it's so funny that he can laugh at himself. I think I was made in the image of a sissy truck driver. That's in Naphtha, one of my favorite poems. I think I was made in the image of a sissy truck driver. And I don't think they're clever lines at all. I hate clever lines in poetry. I think there's so many poets that have these well, where are the clever lines?
Sissy truck driver.
That's a clever
Well,
line.
but it fits into the poem. You see, in the context, it's always a matter of context. There's nothing wasted here. I mean, I'm not saying this is one of his best poems. I don't even think Lana Turner is one of his best poems. But when he says, grace to be born and live as variously as possible, Second Avenue, it has grace. I would say the quality that O'Hara most has to me is a grace like a ballet dancer almost, on toe. When he's on. He's not always on by any means. The collected poems is thick, and a lot could be eliminated. But the grace is very special and very sad. I want to get back to something Charlie said before. I don't think, a lot of people, Jim Breslin wrote on this, and other people have written on this now much more, that in fact, he's not such a cheerful poet. It's very sad, because these moments don't last. They never last. And there's always death around the corner. And there are many poems that do deal with that directly, and that obsession with death. And then, in fact, he did die so young. And so there's a lot of sadness and a lot of feeling you never get what you want, really quite. And you joke about it. Anyway.
Charlie, final thought?
I had a very interesting to me experience, because I've always seen O'Hara as a kind of ally in sort of personal responsiveness to the world. But partially because of what I'm thinking about, I think now that there really is a challenge to philosophical thought in this work. And it's essentially, this is a kind of naturalism. What's entailed in that naturalism? How do we come to terms with the sadnesses? How do we come to terms with the limitations of desire? And it's really trying to work towards a totally secular culture.
I think that's a good point.
And a sense that even the whole intellectual processes are not close enough to the domains of desire and immediacy to help sort of work out the kinds of values we need. So now I think that there's really a kind of instructive quality in this poetry that I hadn't seen before.
Appreciate that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. My final thought is pedestrian compared to what you guys have said, but it's just something I have to say about this Lana Turner poem. Years ago, a student came to me and said, I want to get going on my writing, not pre-writing, state of mind thing. I don't know how to, I'm not a creative writing teacher. I don't know how to do that. But how do I get, in the first lines, how do I get a sense of revving up? How do I get going to my topic? And I asked the student to read this poem. And then later I went, and it was apparently helpful. And later I went back and I tried to figure out what was my intuition about that. And it's the ing words which are at the beginning, which disappear. He doesn't use any ing words after he gets going. Doesn't need to. It's almost as if, I don't know, it's a motor scooter and he's like, vroom, 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 vroom. So, trotting, raining, snowing, hailing, snowing, raining. That's all in the first few lines. And then he doesn't need that powerful way of setting a tense. And it is just brilliant, the way that works. It's almost to the point of too much. If you were the creative writing teacher with a red pen, you'd probably say too many of these ing words. But then he just goes off and does his thing. So we like to end Poem Talk with a minute or two of Gathering Paradise, which is a chance for all of us, if you're quick, to spread wide our narrow Dickinsonian hands to gather something really poetically good, to hail or something going on in the poetry world or the film world or the opera world. And so who wants to gather some paradise? Bob, do you have any recommendations?
I've been rereading Kleinsaller, and he has his most recent book is Snow Approaching on the Hudson, and sometimes it's hard with Kleinsaller to think, well, what's this poem about? Is it about an experience? But a lot of them are just gatherings of strange terms and strange voices, and he's very non-O'Hara, though they're both city poets. They both feel that what they should be doing is recording and rendering memorable, unusual urban experiences. So I would recommend his Snow Approaching on the Hudson, a different kind of poetry.
When was it published?
21.
21, so it's new.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good suggestion. Marjorie Perloff, recommend something.
I'm going to recommend Charlie's
Charlie himself,
Literature,
right here.
Education, and Society,
Can you
Bridging
show
the
the
Gap.
camera?
Because I haven't read it. I mean, I've just gotten it. But Charlie really, of all people I know, really has a great understanding for education without being corny about it and doing the usual sociological moves. I've just been reading John Guillory, which I, in a way, am disappointed in. So I'm hoping that I'm looking forward to reading this and Bridging the Gap. And I'm very glad he's taken this on because, you know, we can all say things, but it's so hard to take this topic on today when English studies are in so much trouble. The other book I'm going to recommend, which we were talking about before, is Afro-Pessimism and Incognegro by Frank Wilderson. These are not my usual sorts of books. I don't specialize in any way.
Afro-pessimism is like 2020. It's a recent
2020,
book.
and the other one is 2016. Incognegro, and maybe the better of the two even, or the livelier of the two. Now, these are mixes of autobiography, theory, doctrine. The narrative part is much the best part. The theory is sometimes overdone in some ways, but the narrative part is simply brilliant because, again, I guess it's just a quality I look for, and the older I get, the more I look for it, of somebody who can laugh at themselves, who doesn't take themselves so seriously, and who doesn't preach.
Thank you, Marjorie. Charlie, go ahead and make your recommendation.
Well, let me do two recommendations, really. One is the poet Robin Schiff. And she's got 3 books. The first one is Worth, and the third one, which is really spectacular, has Worth in the title. I don't remember the rest of it. But what interests me about her is that she does a kind of free associational poems that keep coming back to various motifs. So she has a kind of freedom, but a kind of structure at the same time. But it's not a fixed structure. I mean, it's one of the ways of dealing with multiplicity and flux that I find quite exciting, and she's very inventive. And the other book is just my stuff, but Heidegger wrote in 1951 a kind of commentary on Hegel's philosophy of experience. And what's great about it is Heidegger and Hegel are like the last people to imagine in the same conjunction. Just Heidegger hated history. Hegel sort of shaped or tried to find a shape to history. But what Heidegger does is try to understand why Hegel's notion of experience is distinctive. And it's because you're aware of the conditions by which you're experiencing. And I think that is really relevant to what art does, as well as what a possible philosophy could do. But that is, I think I think O'Hara is quite aware of kind of this, is you don't just have an experience, but you have a sense of the significance of what you're experiencing at the same time. And part of the activity of the poet is to relate that secondary level, your meta level in a way. And so I think it was very exciting in lots of
that is the
directions.
first time that Heidegger has been recommended in Gathering Paradise.
Well,
here at
I
PoemTalk.
never thought I would be
180
recommending
plus.
Heidegger, actually.
You're not recommending him, but we haven't heard Heidegger in Gathering Paradise. We now have. My Gathering Paradise is a recommendation of a section of Barbara Guest's The Confetti Trees, which is possibly prose poems. And the one section I'm interested in and I want to recommend is called The Minus Ones. And it was written as Barbara Guest was reflecting upon her girlhood in Los Angeles, surrounded by the emigres of World War II, people in art and film, the brothers Mahler, Schoenberg, the camera people. And she absorbed all of this sense of the refugees and their reasons for coming to Los Angeles as a child. And she wrote a piece, The Minus Ones, which is about a young girl trying to start to write. And she writes stories that no one will want to publish because they have absorbed the plotlessness and the avant-garde-ism of the people, including the film people that she was surrounded by. And it's just a lovely reminiscence based, really, without knowing this, you wouldn't know that the emigre experience of World War II with a girl growing up in Los Angeles was part of it. When you read it together, you realize her experiment in a surrealist story writing has that as its basis. Just for me,
thank you.
A remarkable thing. Well, that's all the no rain in California. And I say that because I've been here all week and there hasn't been any rain. And I realized that you guys
There's no
got
snow.
There's no snow in California.
No hail.
No hail. But
Well, we've got snow on the mountains. Mount Baldy has snow. Yeah.
This week, no rain in California. That's all the no rain in California we have time for on PoemTalk today. PoemTalk at the Writers' House is a collaboration of the Kelly Writers' House and Penn Sound and Jacket 2 at the University of Pennsylvania. Thanks so much to my guests, so much. This has been so great. Bob von Hallberg, Charlie Altieri, and Marjorie Perloff. And thanks once again to Marjorie for hosting us today. And to PoemTalk's director and videographer, Zach Cardner, who's right there. I'm snapping away from my mic. And Chris Martin for handling the audio. And to PoemTalk's editor, the same amazing Zach Cardner, who's got quite a job ahead of him. Next time on PoemTalk, we'll be back at the Writers' House in Philadelphia talking with Erica Kaufman, Simone White, and Joan Ritalik about a poem by Tina Dara called Wire Boxes. It's a great poem. This is Al Filreis, and I hope you'll join us for that or another episode of PoemTalk.